Hey everyone, tonight we begin with a journey into the surprisingly scandalous world of ancient Roman romance, where courtship involved kidnapping, marriages were business transactions, and divorce could happen with a simple handshake. We quote re-diving deep into what love, lust and relationships really looked like when togas were trendy and gladiators ruled the entertainment scene. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It quote S, always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey. Together, picture this. You're a young Roman woman in 150 CE. Your father has just informed you that tomorrow you'll be meeting your future husband for the first time. Not on a dating app, not at a coffee shop, but at your own wedding ceremony. Your dowry has been negotiated, the contract signed, and your entire romantic future sealed, while you are busy learning to weave wool and manage household slaves. Welcome to ancient Roman dating, where swiping right meant your father approving a marriage proposal, and ghosting someone could literally result in actual ghosts seeking vengeance. The Romans didn't date. They strategized. Every romantic encounter was a political calculation. Every marriage a merger, every divorce a hostile takeover. And yet somehow, in this world of arranged marriages and social climbing, real love managed to bloom in the most unexpected places. From passionate affairs that toppled emperors to love letters that survived 2,000 years, the Romans proved that even in a society obsessed with status and power, the heart wants what it wants. But here's what's truly fascinating. The Romans invented many of the romantic traditions we still follow today. Valentine's Day, wedding rings, honeymoons, even the phrase tying the knot, all trace their roots back to the cobblestone streets of ancient Rome. They were simultaneously the most practical and most passionate people in history when it came to matters of the heart. Tonight, we're going to explore how a civilization that gave us concrete roads and aqueducts also gave us some of the most intense love stories ever recorded. From the scandalous affair between Cleopatra and Mark Antony that changed the course of history, to the everyday rituals of courtship that would make modern dating seem absolutely tame. We'll discover why Roman women had more romantic freedom than their medieval descendants, how gladiators became ancient Rome's equivalent of rock stars, and why some Roman divorces were more dramatic than any reality TV show. So settle in as we uncover the secrets of Roman romance, where love was a battlefield, marriage was warfare, and passion could quite literally be a matter of life and death. And let's start with the foundation of all Roman relationships, the family. But not the warm, fuzzy family you might imagine. The Roman family was a ruthless hierarchy ruled by the paterfamilias, the male head of household who held absolute power over every member. This wasn't just social authority, it was legal ownership. A Roman father could sell his children into slavery, expose unwanted babies on hillsides, and arrange marriages without consulting anyone, including the bride and groom. The paterfamilias literally held the power of life and death over his family members. This wasn't metaphorical. Roman law gave fathers the right to execute their own children if they brought shame to the family name. Imagine trying to introduce your boyfriend to a father who could legally have you both crucified if he disapproved of the relationship. For Roman women, this system created a complex web of dependence and strategy. A girl remained under her father's control until marriage, at which point she might transfer to her husband's authority, or in later periods, remain under her birth family's protection. This legal arrangement meant that Roman women often had to navigate multiple male authorities just to make basic life decisions, including whom they could see, speak to, or even smile at in public. But here's where it gets interesting. Roman women found ways to work within and around these restrictions. They became masters of subtle communication, using everything from hairstyles to jewellery to send coded messages about their availability, interests, and intentions. A particular way of draping a stola, the formal dress worn by married women, could signal everything from marital satisfaction to secret affairs. Young Roman women learned early that survival meant becoming excellent judges of character and skilled negotiators. They had to read the political landscape of their families, understand the financial implications of potential matches, and somehow find ways to express their personal preferences without appearing disobedient or unmarriageable. The pressure was immense. An unmarried woman past the age of 20 was considered practically a social catastrophe. But marriage to the wrong man could mean a lifetime of misery, potential violence, or political disgrace. Roman women had to become strategic thinkers, capable of influencing powerful men while appearing properly submissive. This created a generation of women who were simultaneously powerless and incredibly cunning. They couldn't vote, own property in their own names in early periods, or make major life decisions independently. Yet they often wielded enormous behind-the-scenes influence, shaping political alliances, business deals, and social movements through careful manipulation of the men in their lives. Roman mothers became expert matchmakers, using their social networks to identify suitable partners for their children, while also gathering intelligence about potential suitors' financial stability, family reputation, and personal character. They held elaborate dinner parties and social gatherings designed to allow young people to meet under carefully supervised circumstances. The result was a society where romance existed, but it was always filtered through layers of family politics, social expectations, and economic necessity. Love might bloom, but it had to prove itself worthy of survival in a world where practical considerations could crush even the most passionate feelings. Now, let's talk about what actually constituted dating in ancient Rome, because it was nothing like what we'd recognise today. There were no casual coffee dates, no long walks in the park, and certainly no Netflix and chill. Roman courtship was a highly ritualised dance of social positioning, family negotiations, and carefully orchestrated public appearances. For the upper classes, potential romantic connections usually began at public events. The theatre, gladiatorial games, religious festivals, and elaborate dinner parties served as the primary venues where young Romans could see and be seen. But even these encounters were heavily chaperoned and loaded with social significance. Roman men who were interested in a particular woman couldn't simply approach her directly. Instead, they had to navigate a complex system of intermediaries, family connections, and social protocols. A young man might express interest by sending gifts to the woman's family, writing poetry that circulated in literary circles, or demonstrating his worthiness through public achievements in politics, military service, or business. The gift-giving aspect of Roman courtship was particularly elaborate. Suitors would send expensive jewellery, rare perfumes, exotic foods, and even slaves to demonstrate their wealth and serious intentions. But these gifts weren't given directly to the woman. They went to her father or male guardian, who would then decide whether to accept them and what message to send in return. Roman women, meanwhile, had their own subtle ways of indicating interest or disinterest. They might choose to wear certain colours, known to be favoured by a particular suitor, arrange to be seen at events where he would be present, or use female friends and slaves to pass along carefully worded messages. The art of the meaningful glance across a crowded amphitheatre became a crucial skill. Religious festivals provided some of the few opportunities for less formal interaction. During celebrations like the Lupercalia, young Romans could engage in ritualised flirtation that would be scandalous under normal circumstances. Men would run through the streets wearing only goatskins, playfully striking women with leather thongs in a fertility ritual that everyone understood as socially acceptable romantic aggression. But even these festivals had rules. Women who participated were making public statements about their availability and intentions. A married woman who allowed herself to be struck during Lupercalia was sending a message about her desire for children. An unmarried woman was advertising her readiness for romance and marriage. For the lower classes, courtship was somewhat more direct, but no less complicated. Working-class Romans might meet at markets, workshops, or taverns, but they still had to navigate family expectations and social hierarchies. A female slave could catch the eye of her master, or a free citizen, but such relationships carried enormous risks and rarely led to legal marriage. Prostitutes, who occupied a complex position in Roman society, often served as informal matchmakers and sources of romantic advice. The better-educated courtesans maintained salons where young aristocrats could practice their seduction techniques and learn the arts of conversation and flirtation in relatively safe environments. The Romans also developed an entire industry around love magic and romantic advice. Professional fortune tellers would read omens to determine romantic compatibility. Potion makers sold aphrodisiacs and love charms. Even respectable matrons consulted oracles about their daughters' marriage prospects and romantic futures. But perhaps the most important aspect of Roman courtship was its publicity. Nothing happened in private. Every romantic gesture was observed, analysed, and gossiped about throughout the social network. A man's reputation could be made or destroyed by how he handled a courtship. A woman's entire future could depend on maintaining the perfect balance between availability and respectability. This meant that Roman dating was essentially a form of performance art, where every participant was simultaneously actor and audience, constantly aware that their romantic choices were being evaluated by everyone around them. It was exhausting, strategic, and absolutely nothing like the private, individual-focused dating culture we know today. And yet, despite all these constraints and complications, Romans managed to fall deeply, passionately, and sometimes catastrophically in love. They wrote some of history's most beautiful love poetry, staged elaborate romantic gestures that became legendary, and created love stories that we still tell today. Because ultimately, no amount of social control could completely suppress the human heart's desire for connection, passion, and intimacy. The marriage ceremony itself was where Roman romance reached its most theatrical peak. These weren't simple exchanges of vows in a quiet chapel. Roman weddings were elaborate, multi-day spectacles designed to publicly display wealth, social status, and political alliances, while also invoking the protection of the gods for the new union. The process began with the engagement ceremony, called the sponsalia, which was essentially a business meeting disguised as a celebration. The fathers of the bride and groom would negotiate the dowry, establish the terms of the marriage contract, and make public announcements about the alliance their families were creating. The actual couple might not even be present for these crucial negotiations that would determine their entire future together. Roman brides prepared for their wedding day with rituals that were part beauty treatment, part religious ceremony, and part psychological preparation for a complete life transformation. The night before the wedding, the bride would sacrifice her childhood toys to the household gods, symbolically ending her life as a daughter and preparing to become a wife. On the wedding day itself, the bride wore a special outfit that was loaded with symbolic meaning. Her dress was a pure white tunic called a tunica recta, woven on an ancient type of loom and fastened with a woolen belt tied in a special knot called the knot of Hercules. Only her husband could untie this knot, and the difficulty of undoing it was supposed to symbolize the permanence of their union and test the groom's patience and determination. The bride's hairstyle was equally significant. Her hair was arranged in 6 braids using a spear, supposedly one that had killed a gladiator, to ensure fertility and protection. She wore a flame-coloured veil called a flammium that covered her face completely, and a crown of flowers, often including marjoram, which was associated with happiness and fertility. The actual ceremony took place in the bride's family home, usually in the atrium where the household gods resided. The couple would join hands while holding the marriage contract, and a priest would sacrifice an animal, usually a pig or sheep, to ensure divine approval. The bride and groom would then share a special wedding cake made from flour, salt and water, while guests shouted "Felicita," meaning good luck. But the real drama came with the wedding procession to the groom's house. This was a carefully choreographed parade designed to demonstrate the bride's transition from one family to another, while also warding off evil spirits that might threaten the new marriage. The bride was literally carried away from her father's house, often while pretending to resist, in a ritual that symbolized the ancient practice of marriage by capture. The procession included torchbearers, musicians, and guests singing traditional wedding songs, some of which were quite bawdy by modern standards. Children scattered nuts and coins along the route to ensure prosperity, while the bride carried symbols of her new domestic role, including a spindle and distaff for weaving. When the procession reached the groom's house, the bride had to perform several ritualistic actions to ensure good luck. She rubbed oil and fat on the doorposts, was lifted over the threshold to avoid tripping, which would bring bad luck, and was presented with fire and water, representing her new responsibilities for maintaining the household. The wedding feast that followed could last for days, depending on the family's wealth and social ambitions. These celebrations were opportunities for political networking, business deals, and social climbing. The quality of the food, entertainment, and gifts distributed to guests sent clear messages about the family's status and the importance of the marriage alliance being created. For Roman women, the wedding day represented both an ending and a beginning. They were leaving behind their childhood identities and taking on new roles as wives, future mothers, and managers of household economies. The ceremony's emphasis on fertility, domesticity, and submission to male authority made clear what society expected from married women. Yet many Roman wives found ways to carve out spaces of personal agency and influence within these traditional roles. The most successful Roman marriages became partnerships where women wielded significant behind-the-scenes power, managing family finances, social connections, and political relationships, while maintaining the appearance of proper wifely submission. The wedding night itself was another carefully orchestrated ritual, but one that finally offered the couple some privacy after days of public ceremony. Roman bedrooms were prepared with specific herbs and flowers believed to ensure fertility and ward off evil spirits. Rose petals, lavender, and myrtle were scattered across the marriage bed, while small oil lamps flickered to keep away any malevolent forces that might interfere with the consummation. But here's where Roman practicality clashed with romantic idealism. Many couples were meeting for essentially the first time on their wedding night, having had only brief, chaperoned encounters during the courtship process. Imagine the pressure of having to create intimacy with a complete stranger, while also fulfilling family expectations for producing heirs as quickly as possible. Roman medical texts from the period reveal that wedding night anxiety was common enough that physicians developed specific remedies for nervous brides and grooms. They prescribed various herbal concoctions, relaxation techniques, and even detailed instruction manuals for couples who had received little to no education about physical intimacy. The morning after brought yet another ritual called the repotia, a second celebration where the new bride received gifts from her husband's family and formally took on her role as a Roman wife. She would make her first sacrifice to the household gods as a married woman and receive the keys to the family home, symbolizing her new authority over domestic affairs. But marriage in ancient Rome wasn't just about personal relationships. It was fundamentally an economic and political institution designed to preserve and transfer wealth, create alliances between families, and produce legitimate heirs to continue family lines. The romantic feelings of the actual couple involved were considered nice bonuses, but certainly not requirements for a successful union. This practical approach to marriage created some fascinating dynamics. Roman law recognized different types of marriage, with varying levels of commitment and legal obligation. The most formal type, called confariatio, was reserved for the upper classes and involved elaborate religious ceremonies that made divorce extremely difficult. Middle-class Romans often chose a simpler form, called coemptio, which was essentially a symbolic purchase of the bride by the groom's family. But the most interesting was the informal marriage, called usus, where couples could become legally married simply by living together continuously for a year. This type of marriage gave women more legal protection and autonomy, since they remained under their father's authority rather than transferring to their husband's control. Roman wives in successful marriages often wielded considerable influence behind the scenes. They managed household finances, supervised large staffs of slaves, arranged their children's education and marriages, and maintained the social connections that were crucial for their husbands' political and business success. The most skilled Roman wives became informal advisors and power brokers, shaping important decisions while maintaining the appearance of proper feminine submission. Yet the legal reality remained stark. Roman husbands had almost unlimited authority over their wives and children. They could divorce their wives without cause, reclaim dowries, and even demand the return of children. A Roman wife who committed adultery could be killed by her husband or father without legal consequences, while male adultery was barely considered worth mentioning unless it involved another man's wife. These harsh legal realities meant that Roman women had to become experts at reading male moods, managing household politics, and building networks of female allies who could provide support and protection. The most successful Roman wives cultivated relationships with other powerful women, creating informal support systems that could provide refuge during marital crises or political upheavals. Motherhood brought both elevated status and increased vulnerability for Roman women. A wife who produced sons gained enormous respect and influence within her household, while women who remained childless or bore only daughters faced potential divorce and social disgrace. Roman medical practices around pregnancy and childbirth were primitive and dangerous, making every pregnancy a life-threatening gamble. But successful Roman mothers often became the most powerful women in their families, maintaining influence over their adult children and playing crucial roles in arranging marriages and political alliances. The title Mater Familias carried real authority, and elderly Roman women who had successfully raised multiple children to adulthood were revered and consulted on important family decisions. The daily reality of Roman married life varied dramatically depending on social class and individual circumstances. Wealthy wives supervised elaborate households with dozens of slaves, entertained important guests, and participated in the social rituals that maintained their family status. They spent their days managing complex domestic economies, overseeing children's education, and maintaining the social connections that were crucial for their husband's success. Middle-class Roman wives had fewer resources, but often more direct involvement in family businesses. They might help manage shops, workshops, or small farms while also handling traditional domestic responsibilities. These women often developed practical skills and business acumen that gave them more economic independence than their wealthier counterparts. For lower-class Roman women, marriage offered potential security, but also additional burdens. They continued working outside the home while also managing households and raising children. Many worked alongside their husbands in family trades or took on jobs like midwifery, textile work, or food preparation to supplement family income. Roman society also recognized that not all marriages would succeed, and they developed relatively progressive divorce laws that allowed both men and women to end unsuccessful unions. Unlike many ancient cultures, Romans didn't view divorce as inherently shameful, though the social and economic consequences could be severe, particularly for women. The process of Roman divorce was surprisingly simple. In legal terms, in the earliest periods, either spouse could end the marriage by declaring their intention before witnesses. Later regulations required written notices and waiting periods, but divorce remained relatively accessible compared to other ancient societies. However, the practical consequences of divorce were far more complicated. Women typically had to return to their birth families, often bringing shame and financial burden. They might lose access to their children, who legally belonged to their father's family. Divorced women also faced significant challenges in remarrying, particularly if they were older or had been divorced multiple times. Despite these risks, some Roman women did choose divorce as a way to escape abusive or incompatible marriages. The most famous example was probably Cicero's daughter Tullia, who divorced her first husband after he proved to be violent and financially irresponsible. Her father supported her decision and helped arrange a more suitable second marriage. Roman divorce law also revealed the society's complex attitudes about female sexuality and independence. A woman could divorce her husband for adultery, cruelty, or failure to provide economic support. But she could also be divorced for drinking wine, appearing in public without permission, or failing to produce children within a reasonable time. These legal frameworks created a marriage system that was simultaneously more flexible and more restrictive than many other ancient cultures. Roman women had more opportunities to escape truly terrible situations, but they also faced constant pressure to conform to strict behavioural expectations that could be used against them at any time. The result was a society where marriage was both a source of security and a constant negotiation, where love might bloom, but survival always required careful calculation and strategic thinking. The Romans were obsessed with physical beauty, but their standards were utterly alien to our modern sensibilities. Imagine thinking that unibrows were the height of feminine attractiveness, that pale skin was so desirable that women painted their faces with lead-based makeup that slowly poisoned them, and that body hair removal was so important that wealthy Romans employed teams of slaves whose only job was plucking unwanted hairs with bronze tweezers. Roman beauty rituals were elaborate, expensive, and often dangerous. Women applied mixtures of chalk and white lead to achieve the coveted pale complexion that signalled they were wealthy enough to avoid outdoor labour. They darkened their eyebrows with soot and antimony, sometimes drawing them together in a single line across their foreheads. Red ochre coloured their lips and cheeks, while elaborate hairstyles required hours of work by skilled slave hairdressers who could be beaten or killed if they made mistakes. Men weren't exempt from beauty pressures either. Roman men spent fortunes on personal grooming, visiting public baths multiple times per day, having their body hair meticulously plucked, and wearing perfumes so strong they could be smelled from across a room. A well-groomed Roman gentleman might spend more time on his appearance than his wife, employing specialised slaves to trim his nails, massage his scalp, and maintain his carefully sculpted beard. The public baths were where much of Roman social and romantic life actually happened. These weren't just places to get clean. They were elaborate social clubs where Romans of all classes mingled, gossiped, conducted business, and sized each other up as potential romantic partners. The largest baths could accommodate thousands of people simultaneously, with separate areas for different activities including exercise, massage, socializing, and various forms of bathing. Roman bathing culture was incredibly sophisticated but also deeply voyeuristic. The baths were places where bodies were on display, where social hierarchies were literally naked, and where Romans could observe potential romantic partners in states of undress that would be impossible in normal social settings. Wealthy Romans brought entourages of slaves to assist with bathing, massage, and grooming, turning their bath visits into theatrical displays of wealth and status. But the baths were also democratic spaces where social boundaries could be temporarily suspended. A successful merchant might find himself sharing a pool with a senator, while their wives compared jewellery and gossiped about whose marriage was thriving and whose was falling apart. These interactions created opportunities for romance that wouldn't exist in the formal chaperoned world of upper-class social events. Roman attitudes toward sexuality were simultaneously more open and more restrictive than modern sensibilities. They had no concept of sexual orientation as we understand it, instead focusing on active versus passive roles regardless of the gender of one's partner. A Roman man could have sexual relationships with male or female slaves, prostitutes, or social inferiors without any social stigma, as long as he maintained the dominant position. However, this sexual freedom came with strict boundaries. Roman citizens, particularly women, were expected to maintain rigid standards of sexual propriety. An unmarried woman who lost her virginity faced social ruin and potential legal consequences. A married woman who committed adultery could be killed by her husband or father without legal repercussions. Even divorced women faced intense scrutiny of their sexual behaviour and could be denied remarriage if their reputations were damaged. The Romans developed an elaborate vocabulary around different types of sexual relationships and romantic attachments. They distinguished between amor, passionate romantic love that was considered potentially dangerous and destabilizing, and affectio, the steady affection expected between married partners. Cupido represented sexual desire, while Venus embodied the divine aspects of love and fertility. Roman love poetry, particularly the works of poets like Ovid, Catullus, and Propertius, reveals a society torn between celebrating passionate romance and fearing its destructive power. These poets wrote about love affairs with an intensity and psychological insight that rivals any modern romance novel. But they also warned constantly about love's ability to destroy careers, families, and political alliances. The most famous Roman love affair between Mark Antony and Cleopatra perfectly illustrated these tensions. Their relationship was simultaneously celebrated as one of history's great romances and condemned as a betrayal of Roman values that nearly destroyed the empire. Roman historians couldn't decide whether to portray Cleopatra as a brilliant seductress or a dangerous foreign witch who corrupted a great Roman general. Roman women found creative ways to express romantic and sexual agency within their society's restrictions. They developed coded languages of dress, jewellery, and behaviour that could communicate availability, desire, or rejection while maintaining plausible deniability. A particular way of arranging one's hair, wearing certain colours, or positioning oneself at social events could send clear messages to those who knew how to read them. Wealthy Roman women also employed networks of female slaves and freed women who could carry messages, arrange secret meetings, and provide alibis for romantic adventures. These women often became confidants and co-conspirators, creating shadow networks of female solidarity that operated beneath the official male-dominated social structure. The institution of slavery created particularly complex romantic dynamics in Roman society. Masters had unlimited sexual access to their slaves, but these relationships existed in legal and social grey areas that could be emotionally devastating for everyone involved. Some masters fell genuinely in love with their slaves and freed them for marriage, while others treated sexual access as simply another form of property ownership. Female slaves faced particular vulnerabilities with no legal protection against sexual assault or coercion from their masters or other household members. Yet some enslaved women managed to use their sexual relationships strategically, gaining influence, protection, and eventually freedom through careful navigation of their masters' desires and household politics. The Romans also created a sophisticated prostitution industry that served multiple social functions beyond simple sexual commerce. High-class courtesans were often highly educated women who provided intellectual companionship, cultural sophistication, and emotional intimacy that might be missing from arranged marriages. They hosted salons, patronized artists, and sometimes wielded considerable political influence through their relationships with powerful men. Roman law recognized different categories of sex workers, from expensive courtesans who chose their own clients to enslaved prostitutes who had no control over their circumstances. The most successful courtesans could accumulate significant wealth and social influence, though they remained legally and socially marginalized regardless of their personal achievements. Religious festivals provided some of the most socially acceptable opportunities for Romans to engage in behaviours that would be scandalous under normal circumstances. During Saturnalia, social hierarchies were temporarily reversed, slaves could mock their masters, and sexual norms were relaxed. The festival of Floralia celebrated fertility with theatrical performances that were openly erotic, while Lupercalia involved ritualized nudity and physical contact between men and women. These festivals served as pressure valves for a society with strict social and sexual norms, allowing Romans to engage in behaviours that would otherwise be forbidden while maintaining the fiction that such activities were religious obligations rather than personal choices. They also provided opportunities for romantic connections that might not be possible within the normal constraints of Roman social life. Roman medical understanding of sexuality and reproduction was primitive but surprisingly detailed in some areas. Physicians like Serranus wrote extensively about female anatomy, pregnancy, and childbirth, though much of their advice was based on superstition rather than scientific observation. Roman medical texts reveal fascinating beliefs about sexual compatibility, fertility, and the physical mechanics of attraction. Romans believed that strong emotional and physical attraction between partners was more likely to produce healthy children, leading to medical recommendations that couples should genuinely desire each other rather than simply fulfill marital obligations. This created interesting tensions with the arranged marriage system, as families tried to balance practical considerations with the belief that mutual attraction was important for producing successful heirs. The Romans also developed various methods of birth control and abortion, though these practices were often dangerous and unreliable. Wealthy women had access to herbal preparations, mechanical devices, and surgical procedures that could prevent or end pregnancies, though the legal and social acceptability of these practices varied depending on circumstances and social class. Roman attitudes toward aging and romance were complex and often contradictory. Older men were expected to maintain sexual vigour well into their later years, and many continued taking young wives or maintaining relationships with slaves and courtesans throughout their lives. Older women faced different expectations, with widows often gaining new freedoms but also facing social pressure to remain chaste and devoted to their deceased husband's memories. The most successful Roman marriages evolved into partnerships where both spouses found ways to pursue personal fulfillment while maintaining public respectability. Some couples developed genuine affection and intimacy over time, even if their marriages began as purely practical arrangements. Others maintained cordial public relationships while privately pursuing separate romantic and sexual interests. Roman tombstone inscriptions reveal touching evidence of genuine love and devotion between spouses, with grieving partners commissioning elaborate memorials that celebrated their marriages as sources of happiness and mutual support. These monuments suggest that despite all the practical constraints and social pressures, many Romans did manage to find real love and companionship within their marriage system. The legacy of Roman romantic culture extended far beyond the fall of the empire, influencing European marriage customs, legal systems, and cultural attitudes toward love and sexuality for centuries. Many of our modern wedding traditions, legal concepts about marriage, and even romantic literary genres can be traced back to Roman innovations and practices. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of Roman romance was the idea that love could transcend social boundaries and transform individuals in profound ways. Roman literature is filled with stories of people whose lives were completely changed by love, who made enormous sacrifices for romantic passion, and who found meaning and purpose through their relationships with others. The Romans also pioneered the art of the love letter, creating a literary tradition that would influence romantic correspondence for millennia. These weren't simple notes passed between lovers. They were elaborate literary compositions designed to demonstrate education, wit, and emotional sophistication. Roman love letters were expected to reference classical mythology, quote poetry, and display the writer's knowledge of philosophy and rhetoric. Wealthy Romans employed professional scribes and poets to help craft their romantic correspondence, turning love letters into collaborative artistic projects. The most skilled letter writers could convey passion while maintaining plausible deniability, allowing recipients to interpret messages as either romantic overtures or simple friendly communication, depending on their inclinations and circumstances. The preservation of love letters in Roman literature reveals the intense emotional lives that existed beneath the surface of their practical marriage system. Pliny the Younger's letters to his wife Calpurnia show genuine tenderness and affection, describing how he missed her company during business trips and valued her intelligence and conversation. Cicero's correspondence reveals his devastation when his beloved daughter Tullia died, and his struggle to find emotional connection in his various marriages. But Roman love letters also reveal the constant anxiety that accompanied romantic relationships in a society where political alliances and family honour were always at stake. Writers had to balance expressions of genuine feeling with awareness that their letters might be intercepted, copied, or used as evidence in legal proceedings. The most passionate declarations were often coded in mythological references or literary allusions that could be interpreted multiple ways. Roman poets elevated love letter writing to high art, creating literary works that were simultaneously personal expressions and public performances. Ovid quotes letters from mythological heroines to their absent lovers became models for romantic correspondence, teaching readers how to express longing, reproach, and devotion in psychologically sophisticated ways. The Romans understood that successful relationships required ongoing effort and attention, leading to the development of elaborate gift-giving traditions that went far beyond simple bride prices and wedding presents. Roman lovers exchanged rings, bracelets, perfumes, and small sculptures throughout their relationships, using material objects to maintain emotional connections and demonstrate continuing devotion. These gifts were carefully chosen to convey specific messages about the relationship's status and future prospects. A ring suggested serious intentions and potential engagement. Expensive perfumes indicated the giver's wealth and the recipient's value. Books of poetry suggested intellectual compatibility and shared cultural interests. Even the timing of gift-giving carried significance, with presents offered during religious festivals, birthdays, and anniversaries that marked important relationship milestones. Roman jewellery was particularly elaborate and meaningful, with different designs indicating marital status, social class, and personal preferences. Married women wore specific types of rings and bracelets that proclaimed their unavailability while also displaying their husband's wealth and taste. Unmarried women used jewellery to signal their eligibility and family status, while widows adopted distinctive styles that indicated their availability for remarriage. The Romans also developed sophisticated perfume and cosmetics industries that served romantic and social functions beyond simple beautification. Different scents were associated with specific goddesses, personality traits, and even times of day. A woman might wear rose-scented oils for morning social visits, lavender for afternoon religious ceremonies, and exotic Eastern spices for evening entertainments. Roman men were equally invested in personal fragrance, using perfumed oils to maintain their attractiveness and demonstrate their sophistication. The most expensive perfumes came from distant provinces and required elaborate preparation processes, making them symbols of wealth and cosmopolitan taste that could enhance a man's romantic prospects. Personal hygiene was considered essential for romantic success, but Roman standards were quite different from modern expectations. Daily bathing was common among the upper classes, but Romans also believed that certain natural body odours were attractive and healthy. They distinguished between unpleasant odours caused by poor hygiene and appealing scents that supposedly indicated good health and fertility. Roman medical texts recommended specific diets and lifestyle practices for maintaining romantic attractiveness, including dietary restrictions, exercise routines, and herbal treatments designed to enhance skin tone, breath freshness, and general vitality. These recommendations reveal sophisticated understanding of how physical health affected romantic appeal. Though many of their specific prescriptions were based on superstition rather than medical knowledge. The concept of romantic jealousy was well understood in Roman society, but it was managed through legal and social mechanisms rather than purely personal emotional responses. Roman law recognized adultery as a serious crime, but the penalties were applied unequally depending on gender and social status. A husband's jealousy was considered legitimate and potentially legally actionable, while a wife's jealousy was seen as evidence of improper possessiveness. Roman literature is filled with stories of jealousy leading to violence, political intrigue, and family destruction. The myth of Medea, who killed her own children to punish her unfaithful husband Jason, served as a cautionary tale about the destructive power of romantic jealousy. Roman audiences understood that passionate love could easily transform into equally passionate hatred when relationships failed. But Romans also developed sophisticated strategies for managing jealousy and maintaining relationships, despite the temptations and opportunities that surrounded them. Successful Roman couples learned to balance emotional intimacy with practical recognition that their partners might have other relationships or interests that didn't necessarily threaten their primary bond. The institution of concubinage provided a semi-official outlet for Roman men who wanted intimate relationships outside marriage without the legal and social complications of adultery. Concubines were typically slaves or freed women who provided domestic companionship and sexual intimacy while remaining clearly subordinate to legal wives. This arrangement allowed wealthy Roman men to maintain multiple relationships while preserving the political and economic functions of their official marriages. Roman wives often had to navigate complex household dynamics that included their husbands' concubines, mistresses, and casual sexual partners. The most successful wives learned to manage these relationships strategically, sometimes befriending concubines who could provide information about their husbands' activities and moods, while maintaining their own superior legal and social positions. These arrangements reveal the Romans' practical approach to human sexuality and emotional needs. Rather than expecting monogamous fidelity from marriages that were primarily business and political alliances, Roman society developed systems that acknowledged the reality of human desires while maintaining social stability and family continuity. Roman religious practices included numerous festivals and rituals designed to promote fertility, successful relationships, and family harmony. The festival of Matronalia honoured married women and their contributions to family stability, while Venus and Mars were regularly invoked to bless romantic relationships and ensure successful reproduction. Private household shrines included images of gods and goddesses associated with love, marriage, and fertility, and Roman families regularly made offerings and prayers for romantic happiness and marital success. These religious practices reveal the Romans' understanding that successful relationships required divine assistance as well as human effort. The Romans believed that certain times of year were more auspicious for romantic activities, leading to seasonal patterns in courtship, marriage, and even divorce. Spring festivals celebrating renewal and fertility were popular times for weddings and new romantic relationships, while winter months were considered appropriate for more serious relationship discussions and long-term planning. Roman astrology and fortune-telling included elaborate systems for determining romantic compatibility based on birth dates, family histories, and divine signs. Professional astrologers were consulted before important marriages, and their predictions could influence family decisions about suitable partners and appropriate timing for major relationship milestones. These practices reveal the Romans' sophisticated understanding that successful relationships required careful attention to timing, compatibility, and external circumstances beyond simple personal attraction. They recognized that love existed within complex networks of family, social, and political relationships that all needed to be considered for romantic success. Roman divorce procedures, while legally straightforward, were often accompanied by elaborate social rituals designed to manage the emotional and practical consequences of relationship failure. Divorced couples were expected to divide property, arrange custody of children, and navigate complex networks of mutual friends and family members who might take sides in the separation. The most civilized Roman divorces involved formal ceremonies where couples publicly acknowledged the end of their marriage, while expressing mutual respect and gratitude for positive aspects of their relationship. These ceremonies served important social functions by demonstrating that the divorce was amicable and wouldn't disrupt broader family and political alliances. But Roman divorces could also be bitter, public spectacles involving accusations, counter-accusations, and elaborate legal battles over property, children, and reputation. The most scandalous divorces became sources of entertainment for the broader public, with details of marital discord providing material for gossip, literature, and political commentary. Roman law required divorced women to wait 10 months before remarrying, ostensibly to ensure clear paternity of any children. But this waiting period also served to give families time to negotiate new marriage arrangements and manage the social consequences of the divorce. Divorced men faced no such restrictions and could remarry immediately if they chose. The social stigma associated with divorce varied significantly depending on the circumstances and the individuals involved. A woman divorced for adultery faced lifelong disgrace and severely limited remarriage prospects, while a woman divorced due to her husband's cruelty or incompetence might retain social respectability and find another suitable partner. Roman society also recognized that some marriages were simply incompatible, and that forcing couples to remain together could be more damaging to family interests than allowing them to separate and seek more suitable partners. This pragmatic approach to relationship failure was unusual among ancient cultures and contributed to Rome's relatively stable social system. The Romans developed elaborate systems for managing the complex emotions and practical challenges that accompanied the end of romantic relationships. Former spouses were expected to maintain cordial relationships when they shared children or remained connected through extended family networks. The most successful divorced Romans learned to transform romantic relationships into respectful friendships that could continue to serve mutual interests. These practices reveal the Romans' sophisticated understanding that relationships existed within broader social contexts, and that individual romantic happiness needed to be balanced against family stability, political alliances, and economic considerations. They recognized that love was important, but not so important that it should be allowed to destroy other valuable aspects of social life. Roman attitudes toward remarriage were complex and often contradictory, particularly for women. Widows were generally expected to mourn their deceased husbands for at least 10 months before considering new relationships, and many were pressured by their families to remain single and devoted to their children's interests. But practical considerations often overrode romantic idealism, and widow remarriage was common when it served family political and economic interests. Young widows with substantial dowries and good family connections could often make advantageous second marriages that improved their social and economic positions. Older widows with adult children might choose to remain single and enjoy the independence that came with being freed from both paternal and marital authority for the first time in their lives. The Romans understood that successful romantic relationships required ongoing negotiation and adaptation as circumstances changed over time. Couples who married as teenagers might find themselves completely different people after decades of shared experiences, requiring them to essentially renegotiate their relationship terms while maintaining public appearances of marital harmony. The most successful Roman marriages evolved into genuine partnerships, where both spouses developed mutual respect, shared interests, and emotional intimacy, despite the practical constraints that had originally brought them together. These relationships demonstrated that arranged marriages could sometimes produce deeper and more lasting love than relationships based purely on initial romantic attraction. Roman culture celebrated long-lasting marriages as achievements worthy of public recognition and divine blessing. Couples who remained married for 25 years or more were honoured in special ceremonies, and their tombstones often emphasised the duration and happiness of their unions as evidence of their virtue and divine favour. These celebrations reveal the Romans' recognition that maintaining successful relationships required ongoing effort, compromise, and commitment that went far beyond the initial romantic or practical motivations that brought couples together. They understood that true love was something that developed over time through shared experiences, mutual support, and continued choice to prioritize the relationship despite inevitable challenges and changes. The Romans didn't just stumble into love, they strategized it like military campaigns, and nowhere was this more evident than in their approach to seduction and romantic conquest. Roman men were expected to master the arts of persuasion, flattery, and emotional manipulation with the same dedication they brought to studying rhetoric or military tactics. This wasn't considered manipulative or dishonest. It was simply good preparation for the complexities of adult life. Young Roman men from wealthy families often received formal education in what we might today call pick-up artistry. They studied the works of poets like Ovid, whose Ars Amatoria, or the Art of Love, provided detailed instructions on everything from where to meet women to how to maintain their interest over time. These weren't crude manuals focused purely on sexual conquest. They were sophisticated guides to understanding female psychology, managing complex social dynamics, and building the kind of relationships that could advance both romantic and political goals. Ovid's advice was surprisingly modern in some ways, and utterly alien in others. He recommended that men should learn to dance, dress well, and maintain interesting conversation. He suggested paying attention to women's individual preferences and adapting seduction strategies accordingly. But he also assumed that all women were fundamentally duplicitous and required constant management to prevent them from straying or causing political embarrassment. Roman seduction techniques relied heavily on the strategic use of gifts, poetry, and public displays of devotion that demonstrated both wealth and cultural sophistication. A successful Roman suitor might commission poems celebrating his beloved's beauty, hire musicians to perform outside her window, or arrange elaborate surprise entertainments during public festivals. These gestures served multiple purposes, expressing genuine romantic feeling, while also advertising the suitor's resources and creativity to the woman's family and social circle. The Romans understood that successful seduction required patience and careful attention to timing. Rushing physical intimacy could result in scandal, legal complications, or simply failure to achieve the deeper emotional connection that made relationships personally and politically valuable. Instead, Roman courtship involved gradually escalating intimacy through increasingly personal gifts, more private conversations, and carefully orchestrated opportunities for physical proximity. Roman women, meanwhile, developed their own sophisticated strategies for managing male attention and advancing their romantic interests within the constraints of their social system. They learned to use clothing, jewellery, and cosmetics as communication tools that could attract desirable suitors while discouraging unwanted attention. A particular hairstyle might signal availability for courtship, while certain colours or accessories could indicate family status or personal preferences. Wealthy Roman women employed teams of slaves whose primary responsibilities involved maintaining their mistress's romantic appeal and managing their social relationships. These slaves, often highly educated women from conquered territories, served as confidants, message carriers, and strategic advisors who helped their mistresses navigate complex romantic situations while avoiding social or legal pitfalls. The most skilled Roman women learned to maintain multiple potential romantic relationships simultaneously without compromising their reputations or creating dangerous jealousies. They mastered the art of encouraging suitors just enough to maintain their interest while avoiding commitments that might prevent better opportunities from developing. This required extraordinary social intelligence and emotional control, since a single misstep could result in social disgrace or family fury. Roman society recognized different categories of romantic relationships that served various social and personal functions. Beyond marriage, which was primarily about political and economic alliance, Romans engaged in passionate affairs called amor that were understood to be temporary but intense emotional experiences. They also maintained longer-term relationships with concubines or courtesans that provided ongoing companionship without the legal complications of formal marriage. These relationship categories allowed Romans to separate different aspects of their emotional and social lives in ways that might seem strange to modern sensibilities. A Roman man might genuinely love his wife, while also maintaining passionate affairs with other women and enjoying the intellectual companionship of educated courtesans. Roman women had fewer options, but they also found ways to pursue emotional fulfillment through friendships, religious activities, and carefully managed romantic relationships. The Romans developed an entire vocabulary of romantic emotions that distinguished between different types of attraction, affection, and commitment. They understood that the intense passion of new romance was different from the steady affection of long-term marriage, which was different again from the intellectual compatibility that might develop between friends or the sexual attraction that could exist without deeper emotional connection. This sophisticated understanding of romantic psychology allowed Romans to manage complex relationship networks without necessarily experiencing the jealousy and possessiveness that might plague simpler romantic systems. They expected their partners to have various types of relationships with other people and focused on ensuring that their own particular relationship remained primary and secure rather than trying to eliminate all competing attachments. Roman literature reveals fascinating insights into how these relationship systems actually functioned in practice. Letters between spouses show genuine affection and partnership, while poems about passionate affairs capture the intensity and instability of romantic obsession. Legal documents reveal the practical negotiations that surrounded relationship changes, while tombstone inscriptions provide evidence of relationships that successfully combined practical and emotional satisfaction. But perhaps most interesting are the Roman discussions of relationship failure and the emotional devastation that could accompany romantic loss. Despite their practical approach to love and marriage, Romans were capable of profound grief when relationships ended through death, divorce, or simple incompatibility. Their writings reveal sophisticated understanding of heartbreak, longing, and the challenge of rebuilding emotional life after romantic catastrophe. Roman physicians developed treatments for what we might recognize as depression, anxiety, and other mental health challenges that could accompany romantic difficulties. They prescribed herbal remedies, lifestyle changes, and even travel as ways to help people recover from emotional trauma and prepare for new relationships. These medical approaches reveal Roman recognition that romantic health was connected to overall physical and mental well-being. The Romans also understood that successful relationships required ongoing maintenance and attention. Married couples were encouraged to continue courting each other throughout their marriages, with husbands expected to continue giving gifts and expressing affection rather than taking their wives' devotion for granted. Wives were advised to maintain their physical attractiveness and emotional availability rather than assuming that marriage guaranteed permanent security. Roman relationship advice emphasized the importance of shared interests, mutual respect, and ongoing communication as foundations for lasting romantic satisfaction. While marriages might begin as practical arrangements, the most successful ones evolved into genuine partnerships where both spouses found intellectual, emotional, and physical fulfillment. This required both partners to continue growing and adapting throughout their lives, rather than assuming that love was a fixed state that required no ongoing effort. The Romans recognized that different life stages brought different romantic challenges and opportunities. Young adults focused on establishing themselves socially and economically while exploring their emotional and sexual preferences. Aged Romans dealt with the complexities of managing families, careers, and multiple relationship obligations. Older Romans might find new freedoms and opportunities as their children became independent and their social obligations shifted. Roman society provided different venues and opportunities for romantic connection at each life stage. Young people met at public festivals and family gatherings. Aged Romans connected through business relationships, religious activities, and social obligations. Older Romans might find companionship through shared interests in literature, philosophy, or religious practices that became more important as physical attractions faded. The seasonal rhythms of Roman life also influenced romantic patterns and expectations. Spring brought festivals celebrating fertility and new beginnings that were traditional times for courtship and marriage. Summer provided opportunities for travel and extended social gatherings where new relationships could develop. Autumn was associated with harvest celebrations and family gatherings that strengthened existing relationships. Winter offered more intimate settings for deepening emotional connections and making long-term plans. Roman religious calendar included numerous festivals specifically dedicated to love, marriage, and fertility that provided socially acceptable occasions for romantic behavior that might be scandalous at other times. During these festivals, normal social rules were relaxed, allowing for more direct interaction between men and women and more open expression of romantic interest. The most important of these was Lupercalia, a fertility festival held in February where young men ran through the streets wearing only goat skins and striking women with leather thongs in a ritual believed to promote pregnancy and easy childbirth. Women who wanted to conceive would position themselves to be struck, while those who wanted to avoid pregnancy would stay indoors. The festival provided opportunities for flirtation and romantic connection that would be impossible under normal circumstances. Another significant celebration was the Festival of Flora, the goddess of flowers and spring, which involved theatrical performances that were openly erotic and celebrations that encouraged sexual expression and romantic experimentation. These festivals served as pressure valves for a society with normally strict sexual regulations, allowing Romans to explore desires and connections that were otherwise carefully controlled. Roman wedding traditions also reflected their complex understanding of romantic relationships and social obligations. The elaborate ceremonies weren't just celebrations of individual couples, but community events that reinforced social hierarchies, political alliances, and cultural values. Every aspect of the wedding, from the bride's clothing to the reception entertainment, carried symbolic meaning that communicated messages about the families involved and the expectations for the new marriage. The Roman emphasis on public ceremony and community involvement in romantic relationships reflected their understanding that successful marriages required social support and recognition to survive the inevitable challenges and changes that would occur over time. Private romantic feelings were important, but they needed to be embedded within broader networks of family and community relationships to provide stability and continuity. Roman divorce customs similarly emphasized the community aspects of romantic relationships and the importance of managing relationship changes in ways that minimized social disruption. Even when marriages failed, former spouses were expected to maintain cordial relationships when they shared children or remained connected through extended family networks. The most successful divorces were those that preserved mutual respect and allowed both parties to pursue new relationships without creating ongoing conflict or scandal. The Romans developed elaborate gift-giving traditions that extended far beyond simple expressions of romantic affection to include complex systems of social obligation and political alliance. Romantic gifts were expected to demonstrate not only personal feeling, but also appropriate understanding of social hierarchies and cultural values. The wrong gift could be worse than no gift at all, potentially causing embarrassment or offense that could damage relationships and reputations. Roman courtship gifts followed sophisticated protocols that communicated specific messages about the giver's intentions and the recipient's status. Jewelry indicated serious romantic interest, and potential marriage proposals. Books suggested intellectual compatibility and shared cultural interests. Perfumes and cosmetics demonstrated appreciation for the recipient's beauty and attention to personal care. Food items, particularly expensive delicacies, showed wealth and generosity while also providing opportunities for shared consumption that could enhance intimacy. The timing of gift-giving was as important as the gifts themselves, with different occasions calling for different types of presents and different levels of expense. Birthday gifts were expected, but could be relatively modest. Religious festival gifts should reflect the spiritual significance of the occasion. Anniversary gifts needed to acknowledge the importance of the relationship while also demonstrating continued affection and commitment. Roman women developed their own gift-giving strategies that allowed them to express romantic interest and maintain relationships while working within the constraints of their social positions. They might embroider clothing for their suitors, prepare special foods, or create small decorative objects that demonstrated their domestic skills while also expressing personal affection. These gifts served multiple purposes, showing romantic interest while also advertising the women's qualifications as potential wives. The exchange of rings became particularly significant in Roman romantic culture, evolving from simple tokens of affection to complex symbols of commitment and social status. Different types of rings indicated different relationship stages and social positions, with engagement rings, wedding rings, and anniversary rings all carrying distinct meanings that were understood throughout Roman society. Roman ring customs influenced jewelry traditions throughout the ancient world and continue to shape modern wedding and engagement practices. The circular shape symbolized eternal love and unending commitment, while the materials and designs communicated messages about the couple's wealth, taste, and cultural sophistication. The most elaborate Roman rings included precious stones, intricate metalwork, and even tiny portraits or inscriptions that personalized the jewelry for specific relationships. The Romans also developed sophisticated perfume and cosmetics industries that served romantic and social functions far beyond simple beautification. Different scents were associated with different goddesses, personality traits, and even times of day, allowing Romans to communicate complex messages about their identities, intentions, and availability through their choice of fragrances. Roman perfume making was an elaborate art that required expensive ingredients imported from across the empire and sophisticated preparation techniques that could take months to complete. The most prized fragrances combined multiple exotic elements in complex formulations that were closely guarded. Trade secrets passed down through generations of specialized craftsmen. Personal fragrance became so important in Roman romantic culture that both men and women employed specialized slaves whose primary responsibility was maintaining their master's scent profiles throughout the day. These slaves would reapply perfumes, adjust fragrances for different social occasions, and even create custom blends designed to enhance their master's attractiveness to specific individuals. The Romans understood that scent was closely connected to memory and emotion, leading to strategic use of fragrances to create positive associations and enhance romantic appeal. A woman might wear a particular perfume during early courtship encounters, then use the same scent throughout the relationship to trigger pleasant memories and maintain emotional connection. Men use distinctive fragrances to make themselves memorable and to demonstrate their sophistication and wealth. Roman medical texts included detailed discussions of how different scents affected mood, attraction, and even physical health. Physicians recommended specific fragrances for different romantic situations and relationship challenges, believing that the right scents could enhance fertility, reduce anxiety, and even cure certain forms of lovesickness. The concept of lovesickness was taken seriously in Roman medical practice, with physicians developing elaborate treatments for the physical and emotional symptoms that could accompany intense romantic attraction or relationship difficulties. These treatments included dietary changes, exercise prescriptions, herbal remedies, and even travel recommendations designed to help patients recover from romantic obsession or heartbreak. Roman understanding of the connection between physical health and romantic success led to sophisticated beauty and wellness practices that went far beyond simple cosmetic enhancement. They recognized that genuine attractiveness required overall vitality, emotional stability, and social confidence that could only be maintained through careful attention to diet, exercise, and mental health. The daily routines of wealthy Romans included elaborate health and beauty practices designed to maintain their romantic appeal throughout their lives. Morning exercises, therapeutic baths, massage treatments, and carefully planned meals were all understood to contribute to the kind of physical and emotional vitality that made people attractive romantic partners. Roman physicians also developed detailed understanding of how different life stages affected romantic capacity and appeal, providing age-specific advice for maintaining relationships and attracting new partners as people moved through different phases of their lives. They recognized that the romantic strategies that worked for young adults might be completely inappropriate for middle-aged or elderly Romans, requiring people to adapt their approaches as they aged. The Romans celebrated successful adaptation to aging as evidence of wisdom and continued vitality rather than viewing it as decline or defeat. Older Romans who maintained active romantic lives were admired for their continued engagement with life's pleasures and their ability to provide experienced guidance to younger generations navigating their own romantic challenges. Roman society provided numerous examples of successful romantic relationships that began later in life, demonstrating that love and passion weren't limited to youth, but could develop and flourish at any age when people remained open to new experiences and connections. These relationships often combined emotional intimacy with shared intellectual interests and cultural activities that became more important as physical attractions naturally evolved. The Roman approach to managing the natural changes that accompany aging in romantic relationships was remarkably sophisticated, emphasizing adaptation and growth rather than attempting to maintain youthful appearances and behaviours that might become inappropriate or ineffective over time. They understood that different life stages offered different opportunities for romantic fulfillment, and that wise people learned to embrace these changes rather than fighting against them. Roman literature includes numerous examples of love stories that began in youth and evolved successfully through decades of marriage, demonstrating how initial attraction could deepen into profound partnership when couples remained committed to growing together rather than apart. These stories provided models for how Romans could maintain romantic satisfaction throughout their lives, while also fulfilling their social and family obligations. The Romans recognized that successful long-term relationships required both partners to continue developing as individuals while also strengthening their bond as a couple. This meant pursuing personal interests and friendships, while also investing time and energy in shared activities and mutual goals that kept the relationship dynamic and engaging over time. Roman marriage advice emphasized the importance of maintaining individual identity and personal growth within committed relationships, recognizing that people who lost themselves in their partnerships often became less interesting and attractive to their spouses over time. The most successful Roman couples found ways to support each other's individual development, while also building shared experiences and common purposes that strengthened their emotional connection. This sophisticated understanding of relationship dynamics allowed many Roman marriages to evolve from practical arrangements into genuine love stories that provided both partners with lifelong satisfaction and companionship. While not all Roman marriages achieved this ideal, enough did so that their society developed realistic expectations about what was possible when people approached relationships with wisdom, patience, and genuine commitment to each other's well-being and happiness. The Romans also understood that maintaining romantic relationships required constant attention to the small details that kept partnerships fresh and engaging. They developed elaborate anniversary traditions that went far beyond simple annual celebrations to include monthly observances, seasonal rituals, and even weekly gestures designed to remind couples of their ongoing commitment to each other's happiness and satisfaction. Roman couples were encouraged to recreate their early courtship experiences throughout their marriages, revisiting the places where they first met, exchanging gifts similar to those they had given during their initial romantic pursuit, and even role-playing scenarios from their dating period to maintain the excitement and novelty that had originally brought them together. The most successful Roman marriages included regular periods of separation and reunion that allowed couples to miss each other and rediscover their attraction rather than taking their partnership for granted through constant proximity. Roman men often travelled for business or military service, while women might visit extended family or participate in religious retreats that provided natural breaks in daily domestic routines. These separations were carefully managed to enhance rather than threaten marital bonds, with couples exchanging frequent letters, gifts, and tokens of affection that maintained emotional connection across distances and time. The anticipation of reunion became a source of romantic excitement that could revitalize relationships that might otherwise become stale through excessive familiarity. Roman society also recognized that successful marriages required external support from friends, family members, and community institutions that could provide advice, mediation, and assistance during difficult periods. Extended family networks played crucial roles in helping couples navigate challenges and resolve conflicts before they became serious enough to threaten the relationship's survival. Professional marriage counselors, usually older women with reputations for wisdom and discretion, provided services that helped couples improve communication, resolve sexual difficulties, and develop better strategies for managing household responsibilities and child-rearing obligations. These counselors understood that most marital problems stemmed from unmet expectations and poor communication rather than fundamental incompatibility. Roman religious practices included numerous rituals specifically designed to strengthen marital bonds and resolve relationship conflicts through divine intervention and community support. Couples experiencing difficulties might participate in temple ceremonies, make special offerings to gods associated with marriage and harmony, or undertake pilgrimages to sacred sites believed to have particular power for healing romantic relationships. The Romans developed a sophisticated understanding of how external stresses affected romantic relationships and created social institutions designed to minimize these pressures whenever possible. They recognized that financial difficulties, political uncertainties, health problems, and family conflicts could destroy even the strongest marriages if couples didn't receive adequate support and resources for managing these challenges. Roman law included provisions for protecting marriages from certain types of external interference, including regulations that prevented creditors from seizing dowries, restrictions on political enemies targeting opponents through their family relationships, and legal protections for wives whose husbands were away on military or business obligations for extended periods. The concept of marital privacy was also important in Roman culture, with social customs that protected couples from excessive interference from extended family members, neighbours, and political associates who might otherwise intrude on intimate relationships. While marriages were understood to have public dimensions and social significance, Romans also recognised that couples needed private spaces and time for developing and maintaining their personal emotional connections. Roman homes were designed with specific areas intended for marital privacy, including private bedrooms, garden spaces, and small dining areas where couples could share meals and conversation away from the household staff and extended family members who shared their living spaces. These private areas were considered sacred spaces where the normal social hierarchies and public obligations could be temporarily suspended. The Romans also understood that successful marriages required couples to develop shared interests and activities that provided ongoing sources of connection and enjoyment beyond their basic domestic and reproductive obligations. Wealthy couples might pursue artistic projects, collect books or artwork, or travel together to explore new places and experiences that strengthened their emotional bonds. Middle class. Roman couples often developed shared business interests or craft activities that allowed them to work together while also generating additional income for their households. These collaborative projects provided opportunities for daily interaction and mutual support that could enhance romantic satisfaction while also serving practical family needs. Even lower-class Roman couples found ways to create shared experiences and interests that enrich their relationships despite their limited resources and demanding work schedules. They might participate together in religious activities, neighbourhood celebrations, or informal social groups that provided entertainment and community connection, while also strengthening their personal bonds. Roman society celebrated couples who successfully combined romantic satisfaction with practical achievement, recognizing that the most admirable marriages were those that produced both personal happiness and social benefit. These successful partnerships became models for younger couples and sources of wisdom for those experiencing relationship difficulties. The Romans developed elaborate systems for teaching young people about relationship skills and romantic expectations through mentorship programs, educational activities, and carefully supervised social interactions that prepared them for the complexities of adult romantic life. These educational approaches recognized that successful relationships required knowledge and skills that didn't develop naturally, but needed to be learned through instruction and practice. Roman parents took active roles in preparing their children for marriage by teaching them practical skills like household management and childcare, but also more subtle abilities like reading emotional cues, managing conflicts, and maintaining attractiveness and interest over time. These lessons were considered as important as any academic or professional training in preparing young people for successful adult lives. Young Roman women received particular instruction in the arts of managing male psychology, understanding political and social dynamics, and maintaining their influence within male-dominated household and social structures. They learned to recognize different types of masculine personalities and adapt their communication and behavior styles accordingly to achieve their goals, while maintaining appropriate feminine decorum. Roman men were taught to understand female psychology, emotional needs, and the particular challenges that women faced within their social system. This education was considered essential for maintaining successful marriages and household harmony, since men who couldn't understand and respond appropriately to their wives' needs were likely to experience domestic conflict and social embarrassment. The Romans recognized that gender roles and expectations created particular stresses and challenges for both men and women that required careful management and mutual understanding to prevent relationship problems. They developed sophisticated appreciation for how social pressures affected individual behavior and relationship dynamics, leading to more realistic expectations about what partners could reasonably provide for each other. Roman marriage contracts often included specific provisions designed to address common sources of marital conflict before they became serious problems. These might include agreements about household management responsibilities, financial decision-making authority, social obligations, and even personal behavior standards that both spouses committed to maintaining throughout their marriage. The most elaborate Roman marriage contracts resembled modern prenuptial agreements in their detailed attention to potential future scenarios and their attempts to establish clear expectations and procedures for handling various types of challenges that might arise during the marriage. These contracts reflected Roman understanding that successful relationships required explicit communication and mutual agreement about important issues rather than relying on assumptions or unspoken expectations. Roman divorce laws, while relatively progressive in allowing both partners to end unsuccessful marriages, also included provisions designed to encourage couples to work through difficulties before resorting to separation. Mandatory waiting periods, mediation requirements, and financial penalties for hasty divorces all reflected social recognition that many relationship problems could be resolved with time, effort, and appropriate assistance. The Romans understood that divorce, while sometimes necessary, was generally harmful to everyone involved, including children, extended families, and broader social networks. They developed institutions and practices designed to prevent unnecessary divorces, while also ensuring that people trapped in genuinely destructive relationships had viable alternatives to lifelong misery. Roman society provided numerous examples of couples who successfully overcame serious relationship challenges through patience, professional assistance, and community support. These success stories served as inspiration for others facing difficulties and demonstrated that even severely damaged relationships could sometimes be rebuilt when both partners remained committed to finding solutions. The Roman approach to managing relationship difficulties emphasized practical problem solving, clear communication, and realistic expectations rather than relying purely on emotional appeals or moral exhortation. They understood that most marital problems had identifiable causes and potential solutions that could be discovered and implemented when couples received appropriate guidance and support. Roman medical understanding included recognition that relationship stress could cause physical health problems, leading to integrated approaches that addressed both emotional and physical symptoms of marital discord. Physicians worked with counselors and religious advisors to provide comprehensive treatment for couples experiencing serious relationship difficulties. The Romans also recognized that some relationship problems were symptoms of larger social or economic challenges that couldn't be resolved through individual efforts alone. They developed community resources and institutional supports designed to address these broader issues and prevent them from destroying otherwise healthy marriages and families. Roman religious traditions included numerous ceremonies and rituals designed to renew marital commitments and strengthen emotional bonds between spouses who had experienced difficulties or simply wanted to revitalize their relationships. These renewal ceremonies often became elaborate celebrations that involved extended families and community networks in supporting the couple's recommitment to each other. The concept of marriage as an ongoing process rather than a single event was central to Roman understanding of successful relationships. They recognized that couples needed to continue choosing each other throughout their lives, rather than assuming that initial wedding vows provided permanent security and satisfaction without ongoing effort and attention. Roman anniversary celebrations reflected this understanding by focusing on the couple's achievements and growth rather than simply marking the passage of time. These celebrations provided opportunities for couples to reflect on their relationship's evolution, acknowledge challenges they had overcome together, and recommit to their shared future goals and dreams. The Romans developed sophisticated appreciation for how relationships changed over time and the different types of satisfaction and challenges that accompanied various life stages. They understood that young marriages were different from mature partnerships, which were different again from the companionate relationships that might develop in later life when couples had fulfilled their reproductive and social obligations. This developmental understanding of marriage allowed Romans to maintain realistic expectations about relationship changes while also providing guidance for adapting to new circumstances and finding continued satisfaction throughout different life phases. They recognized that couples who tried to maintain static relationships were likely to experience disappointment and conflict as their circumstances and needs evolved. Roman society celebrated the wisdom and experience that came with long marriages, recognizing that couples who had successfully navigated decades of challenges together possessed valuable knowledge that could benefit younger generations. These experienced couples often served as mentors and advisors, sharing practical insights about maintaining relationships through various difficulties and transitions. The Romans understood that successful marriages required both partners to continue growing as individuals while also deepening their commitment to each other's well-being and happiness. This balance between personal development and mutual devotion was considered the hallmark of truly mature and satisfying romantic relationships that could provide lifelong fulfillment for both partners. Roman literature includes numerous examples of couples who successfully maintained passionate romantic connections throughout decades of marriage, demonstrating that initial attraction could evolve into deeper and more satisfying forms of love when partners remained committed to nurturing their relationship and supporting each other's continued growth and development. The Roman legacy in romantic relationships extended far beyond their specific cultural practices to include fundamental insights about human nature, social dynamics, and the requirements for successful long-term partnerships that remain relevant for understanding love and marriage in any historical context or cultural setting. Their sophisticated understanding of the interplay between individual desires and social obligations, their recognition of the importance of practical considerations alongside emotional satisfaction, and their development of institutions and practices designed to support successful relationships all contributed to creating one of history's most stable and enduring civilizations. The Romans proved that societies could acknowledge and accommodate human romantic needs while also maintaining social order and cultural continuity. Their approach to balancing individual fulfillment with collective responsibility provided models that influenced subsequent European marriage traditions and continue to offer insights for contemporary relationship challenges and opportunities. Roman romantic culture demonstrated that love and passion could flourish within structured social systems when those systems were designed with realistic understanding of human psychology and genuine commitment to supporting individual happiness alongside social stability. Their legacy reminds us that successful relationships require both emotional connection and practical wisdom, both personal commitment and community support. The echoes of Roman romance still resonate in our modern understanding of love, marriage, and the eternal human quest for connection that transcends social boundaries and historical epochs. In their struggles to balance passion with pragmatism, individual desire with social obligation, and romantic idealism with practical necessity. The Romans created templates for navigating the complexities of human relationships that remain remarkably relevant across the centuries. Their legacy lives on not just in our legal systems and architectural monuments, but in the very language we use to describe love itself. When we speak of romantic passion, we're using Roman words. When we exchange rings, we're following Roman customs. When we celebrate Valentine's Day, we're participating in traditions that began in the forums and amphitheatres of ancient Rome. But perhaps the most enduring lesson from Roman romance isn't about their specific practices or social customs. It's about their fundamental understanding that love, in all its complexity, cannot be completely controlled by laws, social expectations, or family obligations. No matter how elaborate the marriage contracts, how carefully negotiated the dowries, or how strategically planned the alliances, the human heart remained stubbornly unpredictable. Roman history is filled with stories of people who defied social conventions for love, who risked everything for passion, and who found ways to create genuine intimacy even within the most restrictive circumstances. From the Emperor Augustus's daughter Julia, whose scandalous affairs eventually led to her exile, to countless ordinary Romans whose tombstones speak of deep affection and mutual devotion. The evidence is clear that authentic human connection flourished even within their rigid social framework. The Romans also understood something that our modern culture sometimes forgets. That sustainable love requires more than just initial attraction or emotional compatibility. It requires shared values, mutual respect, and the kind of practical partnership that can weather the inevitable storms of life together. Their marriages may have begun as business arrangements, but the most successful ones evolved into something far more profound and enduring. Consider the correspondence between Pliny the Younger and his wife Calpurnia, which reveals a marriage that combined genuine affection with intellectual partnership and mutual support. Or the love letters between the Emperor Marcus Aurelius and his wife Faustina, which show how even imperial couples could find authentic intimacy amid the pressures of governing an empire. These relationships demonstrate that Roman pragmatism about marriage didn't preclude deep emotional connection. It simply provided a stable foundation upon which such connections could develop and flourish. Roman women, despite the legal and social restrictions they faced, often wielded considerable influence through their romantic relationships. They became power brokers, political advisors, and cultural patrons who shaped the course of history through their ability to inspire, manipulate, and guide the men in their lives. The most successful Roman women understood that their romantic appeal was a form of political capital that could be invested wisely to achieve goals that would be impossible through direct action. Take Livia, the wife of Augustus, who managed to position herself as one of the most powerful people in Rome through her marriage. She influenced policy decisions, arranged political marriages for her children, and even played a role in determining imperial succession. Her marriage to Augustus lasted over 50 years, and was by all accounts both politically successful and personally satisfying, demonstrating how Roman women could achieve remarkable influence while maintaining the appearance of traditional feminine submission. The Roman approach to managing multiple relationships simultaneously also offers interesting insights into human psychology and social organisation. While we might find their acceptance of concubinage and extramarital affairs morally problematic, their system did acknowledge the reality that human beings are complex creatures with varied emotional and physical needs that might not be fully satisfied within any single relationship. Roman law and social custom created frameworks that allowed people to pursue different types of connections while maintaining primary commitments and social stability. A Roman man might love his wife, enjoy intellectual companionship with an educated courtesan, and find physical satisfaction with various slaves or prostitutes, all while maintaining clear hierarchies and expectations that prevented these relationships from threatening the primary marriage or family structure. This compartmentalization of romantic life might seem cold or calculating by modern standards, but it may have actually reduced the pressure on individual relationships to provide complete fulfillment in all areas of life. Roman wives weren't expected to be everything to their husbands, nor husbands to their wives. This recognition of human limitations and varied needs might have contributed to the stability of Roman marriages and the society as a whole. The Romans were also remarkably sophisticated in their understanding of sexual psychology and the connection between physical intimacy and emotional bonding. Their medical texts include detailed discussions of sexual compatibility, techniques for maintaining attraction over time, and treatments for various forms of sexual dysfunction. They recognized that physical intimacy was crucial for marital happiness and developed practical approaches to addressing problems that might threaten relationship stability. Roman physicians recommended specific exercises, dietary changes, and herbal treatments designed to enhance sexual performance and satisfaction. They understood that sexual problems could be symptoms of broader health issues or relationship difficulties, leading to integrated treatment approaches that addressed both physical and emotional aspects of intimate relationships. The Roman bathing culture played a crucial role in maintaining the physical attraction that supported romantic relationships. The elaborate daily routines of bathing, massage, grooming, and exercise weren't just about cleanliness or social status. They were investments in maintaining the kind of physical appeal that kept marriages vital and exciting over time. Roman couples often bathed together, using these intimate moments for private conversation, physical affection, and the kind of sensual connection that busy daily schedules might otherwise prevent. The privacy of the bathhouse provided opportunities for married couples to reconnect emotionally and physically away from the demands of household management, childcare, and social obligations. The seasonal rhythms of Roman life also supported romantic relationships by providing natural cycles of separation and reunion, work and celebration that prevented marriages from becoming stale through excessive routine. The agricultural calendar meant that many Roman men were away during planting and harvest seasons, creating opportunities for both independence and anticipation that could revitalize marital relationships. Roman religious festivals throughout the year provided couples with opportunities to celebrate together, participate in community activities, and renew their emotional connections through shared spiritual experiences. These festivals often included elements of role reversal, playful interaction, and ritualized flirtation that allowed married couples to rediscover each other in new contexts. The Romans understood that maintaining romantic relationships required ongoing investment of time, energy, and resources. They developed elaborate gift-giving traditions, anniversary celebrations, and renewal ceremonies that kept couples focused on their relationship's importance and provided regular opportunities to express continued commitment and affection. Roman anniversary traditions were particularly sophisticated, with different milestones marked by specific types of celebrations, gifts, and public acknowledgements. Couples who remained married for significant periods were honoured by their communities and often served as examples and mentors for younger people beginning their own romantic journeys. The concept of romantic mentorship was important in Roman culture. with experienced couples expected to provide guidance and support to younger relatives and friends navigating courtship, marriage, and relationship challenges. This created networks of support and wisdom that helped individuals make better romantic choices and maintain successful relationships over time. Roman society also recognized that some people were simply not suited for traditional marriage and developed alternative life paths that allowed them to contribute to society while pursuing different types of personal fulfillment. Vestal virgins, for example, held positions of enormous religious and social importance that provided alternatives to marriage for women who preferred independence or religious devotion to domestic life. Similarly, some Roman men chose to remain unmarried and focus on military careers, political service, or artistic pursuits that might be incompatible with family obligations. While social pressure toward marriage was strong, Roman culture did provide respected alternatives for those whose talents or temperaments were better suited to other forms of contribution. The Romans developed a sophisticated understanding of personality differences and individual variations in romantic needs and preferences. They recognized that some people were naturally more passionate, others more practical, some more social, others more private, and they developed relationship advice that took these individual differences into account rather than assuming that everyone should pursue identical romantic strategies. Roman literature includes detailed character studies of different personality types and their typical romantic patterns, providing insights that remain remarkably relevant for understanding human relationship dynamics. These ancient observations about how different types of people approached love and marriage offer timeless wisdom about the importance of self-knowledge and compatibility in creating successful partnerships. The Roman emphasis on education and cultural sophistication as elements of romantic appeal also created incentives for both men and women to continue learning and growing throughout their lives. The most attractive Romans were those who could engage in intelligent conversation, appreciate art and literature, and contribute to the cultural life of their communities. This emphasis on intellectual development as an element of romantic success meant that Roman relationships often included substantial mental and cultural stimulation alongside emotional and physical connection. Couples who shared interests in literature, philosophy, art, or politics had additional dimensions to their relationships that could provide satisfaction and connection even when other aspects of their partnership faced challenges. Roman dinner parties and social gatherings were designed to showcase these intellectual and cultural qualities, providing venues where couples could demonstrate their compatibility and sophistication to their social networks. The ability to host successful entertainments, engage in witty conversation, and appreciate cultural refinements were all considered important elements of romantic attractiveness and marital success. The Romans also understood that successful relationships required both partners to maintain individual identities and interests, while also building shared experiences and common goals. The most admired Roman marriages were those where both spouses continued to grow and develop as individuals while also strengthening their partnership through mutual support and shared achievements. This balance between individual development and marital commitment required sophisticated emotional intelligence and communication skills that Romans cultivated through education, mentorship, and social practice. The most successful Roman couples learned to support each other's personal growth while also building the kind of partnership that could achieve goals impossible for either individual alone. Roman society provided numerous examples of power couples who combined romantic satisfaction with extraordinary achievement in politics, business, arts, or social reform. These partnerships demonstrated that marriage could enhance rather than limit individual potential when both partners were committed to each other's success and willing to coordinate their efforts toward common objectives. The legacy of Roman romantic culture extends into virtually every aspect of how Western civilization approaches love, marriage, and family relationships. Their legal concepts of marriage contracts, property rights, and divorce procedures formed the foundation for European family law that persists today. Their social customs around courtship, engagement, and wedding ceremonies established traditions that continue to shape how we celebrate romantic milestones. Even our language of love bears Roman influence, with terms like romance, passion, devotion, and intimacy all deriving from Latin roots. When we speak of star-crossed lovers, we're invoking Roman beliefs about fate and destiny. When we exchange wedding vows, we're participating in ceremonial traditions that began in Roman households 2,000 years ago. But perhaps most importantly, the Romans demonstrated that human societies could acknowledge and accommodate the full complexity of romantic relationships while maintaining social stability and cultural continuity. They showed that love and passion could coexist with practical considerations, that individual fulfillment could be balanced with social obligations, and that romantic relationships could serve both personal and collective purposes. Their approach to managing the tensions between desire and duty, between individual choice and family expectations, between emotional satisfaction and social responsibility, offers valuable insights for contemporary challenges in relationship formation and maintenance. While their specific solutions might not be directly applicable to modern circumstances, their underlying wisdom about human nature and social organization remains remarkably relevant. The Romans understood that sustainable romantic relationships require more than just initial attraction or emotional compatibility. They require shared values, mutual respect, practical partnership, and the kind of ongoing commitment that can weather inevitable changes and challenges over time. They recognize that love is both a feeling and a choice, both a gift and a responsibility, both a source of personal joy and a foundation for social stability. In our current era of rapidly changing social norms around relationships, marriage, and family formation, Roman insights about the importance of community support, realistic expectations, and practical wisdom, alongside emotional connection, offer valuable perspectives for creating relationships that can provide both individual fulfillment and social benefit. The Romans proved that societies flourish when they create frameworks that support successful romantic relationships, while also maintaining the flexibility to accommodate individual differences and changing circumstances. Their legacy reminds us that love, in all its complexity and contradiction, remains one of the most powerful forces shaping human experience and social organization. As we navigate our own romantic challenges and opportunities in an increasingly complex world, the Roman example offers both inspiration and practical guidance. They showed us that authentic human connection can survive and flourish even within imperfect social systems, that love can coexist with pragmatism, and that the human heart's capacity for devotion and partnership remains one of our species' greatest strengths across all cultures and historical periods. The story of Roman romance ultimately demonstrates that while the external forms of courtship and marriage may change dramatically across time and culture, the fundamental human needs for connection, intimacy, and partnership remain constant. In their struggles to balance passion with responsibility, individual desire with social obligation, and romantic idealism with practical necessity, the Romans created patterns of relationship that continue to resonate with anyone who has ever fallen in love, faced heartbreak, or sought to build a life with another person. Their legacy lives on not just in our laws and customs, but in our continued belief that love matters, that relationships are worth the effort they require, and that the human capacity for devotion and partnership represents something essential about what makes life meaningful and civilization possible. In this sense, every modern romance is connected to those ancient Romans who first discovered that love could conquer even the most practical obstacles when approached with wisdom, patience, and genuine commitment to another person's happiness and well-being. Their understanding of love as both intensely personal and inherently social created frameworks that allowed authentic intimacy to develop within structured environments, proving that genuine connection doesn't require complete freedom from social expectations, but rather wise navigation of the tensions between individual desire and collective responsibility. The Romans also pioneered what we might recognize as early forms of relationship therapy and marital counseling, understanding that successful partnerships required ongoing maintenance and periodic intervention when problems arose. They developed networks of advisors, mentors, and mediators who could help couples work through difficulties before they became irreparable. These weren't modern psychologists, but experienced community members who understood human nature and had witnessed countless relationships succeed and fail. Roman society recognized that certain life transitions created particular stress on romantic relationships and developed specific support systems for couples navigating these challenges. New parenthood, career changes, illness, financial difficulties, and aging all received attention from community advisors who could provide practical guidance and emotional support during vulnerable periods. The integration of extended family networks into romantic relationships created both opportunities and challenges that Romans learned to manage with considerable sophistication. While modern couples often struggle with in-law relationships and family interference, Romans developed clear protocols for managing these complex dynamics while preserving both individual autonomy and family harmony. Roman mothers-in-law, for example, played crucial roles in training young wives in household management and social navigation, but they also learned to gradually transfer authority and avoid undermining their sons' marriages. Fathers-in-law provided business guidance and political connections while respecting their daughters-in-law's positions within the family hierarchy. These relationships required careful negotiation, but could provide enormous benefits when managed successfully. The Roman concept of honour played a crucial role in romantic relationships, creating both constraints and protections that shaped how couples interacted with each other and with broader society. Personal honour required individuals to keep their promises, treat their partners with respect, and maintain behaviour that reflected well on their families and social circles. This emphasis on honour meant that Roman romantic relationships existed within frameworks of mutual accountability that extended far beyond the immediate couple. Community members had legitimate interests in ensuring that marriages succeeded and that romantic behaviour didn't create scandal or social disruption. While this might seem intrusive by modern standards, it also provided external support and motivation for maintaining relationship quality over time. Roman concepts of hospitality and social reciprocity also influenced romantic relationships, creating expectations that couples would contribute to community life through entertaining, gift-giving, and participation in social networks that bound society together. Successful marriages were those that enhanced rather than diminished the social fabric of their communities. The seasonal and agricultural rhythms of Roman life created natural patterns of intimacy and independence that many modern relationships lack. Couples experienced regular cycles of separation during work seasons and reunion during festivals and family gatherings. These patterns prevented relationships from becoming stale through constant proximity, while also providing regular opportunities for renewed appreciation and connection. Roman understanding of the connection between physical environment and romantic satisfaction led to sophisticated approaches to creating spaces that supported intimate relationships. Homes were designed with specific areas intended for couple privacy, family gatherings, and social entertaining that allowed relationships to flourish in appropriate settings. Gardens, courtyards, and private dining areas provided venues for romantic conversation and intimate meals, away from the bustle of household management and social obligations. These spaces were carefully designed to enhance mood, provide comfort, and create atmospheres conducive to emotional connection and physical intimacy. Roman attention to lighting, temperature, decoration, and even acoustics in private spaces reflected their understanding that environmental factors significantly influenced romantic mood and satisfaction. They invested considerable resources in creating beautiful, comfortable settings that supported the kind of intimate conversation and physical affection that sustained long-term relationships. The Romans developed elaborate traditions around romantic correspondence that allowed couples to maintain emotional connection across distances and express feelings that might be difficult to communicate in person. These letter-writing practices required considerable literary skill and cultural knowledge, creating incentives for both men and women to develop the kind of intellectual sophistication that enhanced their attractiveness as romantic partners. Roman love letters combined personal expression with literary artistry, requiring writers to demonstrate their education, emotional intelligence, and cultural refinement, while also conveying genuine feeling and maintaining appropriate social boundaries. The most successful romantic correspondents learned to balance passion with propriety, creating communications that could be treasured privately, while also reflecting well on the writers if they became public. The preservation of personal correspondence in Roman literature provides remarkable insights into the emotional lives of ordinary people whose feelings and experiences might otherwise be lost to history. These letters reveal the depth of affection, the complexity of desire, and the universality of romantic longing that connected ancient Romans to all subsequent generations of lovers. Roman funeral customs and memorial practices also reflected their understanding of romantic relationships as bonds that transcended death itself. Surviving spouses commissioned elaborate tombstones and monuments that celebrated their marriages as sources of life's greatest happiness and meaning, creating public testimonies to the power of love that endured beyond individual mortality. These memorial inscriptions often emphasized not just the duration of marriages, but their quality, with surviving partners highlighting specific qualities they had cherished in their deceased spouses and expressing hopes for eventual reunion in whatever afterlife awaited them. Such monuments created public affirmations of love's importance that influenced how living couples approached their own relationships. The Roman belief in the continuation of relationships beyond death also influenced how they approached major life decisions, with couples considering not just immediate consequences, but long-term implications that might affect their ability to remain together through various forms of existence. This perspective encouraged patience and commitment during difficult periods by emphasizing relationships' eternal rather than merely temporal significance. Roman religious practices included elaborate rituals for honoring deceased spouses and maintaining spiritual connections with partners who had died before them. These practices provided comfort for the grieving, while also reinforcing social values about the permanent nature of true romantic commitment and the importance of honoring relationship promises even after circumstances made their fulfillment impossible. The Romans understood that successful romantic relationships required both partners to develop resilience and adaptability in the face of inevitable changes and challenges that would test their commitment over time. They recognized that couples who survived and thrived together were those who learned to support each other through difficulties while also maintaining individual strength and purpose. Roman educational practices included specific training in emotional regulation, conflict resolution, and stress management that prepared individuals for the psychological demands of long-term intimate relationships. These skills were considered as important as any practical or professional training in preparing young people for successful adult lives. The concept of romantic partnership as a form of spiritual practice was also present in Roman culture, with successful marriages viewed as achievements that required divine blessing, personal virtue, and ongoing dedication to mutual growth and service. The most admired couples were those who used their relationships as foundations for contributing to their communities and advancing the common good. Roman society provided numerous role models of couples who had successfully combined romantic satisfaction with significant achievements in politics, arts, business, or social reform. These examples demonstrated that marriage could enhance rather than limit individual potential when both partners committed to supporting each other's goals, while also building shared purposes that transcended their individual ambitions. And so we come to the end of our journey through the marble corridors and smoky bedrooms of ancient Rome, where love was always a political statement and passion came with a price list attached. From the paterfamilias, who could literally execute his own children for bad dating choices, to the elaborate wedding processions that were equal parts celebration and business merger, we've seen how the Romans turned romance into an art form that was simultaneously more sophisticated and more brutal than anything we experience today. Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, perhaps you'll dream not of swiping through dating apps, but of navigating the deadly social minefield of Roman courtship, where a poorly chosen perfume could end your political career and a successful marriage required the strategic thinking of a military general. Sweet dreams, and remember that the next time your relationship feels complicated, at least you don't have to worry about your father-in-law having you crucified for forgetting an anniversary.